Something is breaking down inside Iran right now, and it is happening faster than anyone predicted. The man who was supposed to lead the Islamic Republic through its darkest hour just boarded a plane and flew out of Tehran. Not to a war room, not to a command center. He flew to Russia, to a country that can barely keep the lights on in its own refineries, to a man who is drowning in his own war in Ukraine. And Iran's top diplomat walked into that meeting with a message so desperate that his own government felt the need to announce, before the talks even began, that they were not there to beg. When a country has to publicly deny that it is begging for help, it is already begging. But here's what makes this even more alarming. While Iran's foreign minister was sitting across from Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg, something was unraveling back in Tehran that no one in the regime can afford to say out loud. Something that goes far deeper than oil prices or blocked ships. The Islamic Republic is not just losing a war, it is losing its grip on the country it has controlled for 45 years. And what you're about to hear in the next few minutes will explain exactly why the regime is now more scared of its own people than it is of American bombers. Let's start with what the United States just put out. This morning, President Trump made a statement that stopped analysts cold. He said Iran had informed the United States that the country is in a state of collapse, that Iran is desperately trying to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, while simultaneously trying to figure out its own leadership structure. Read that sentence again slowly. A state of collapse, leadership confusion, and a frantic race to reopen a waterway that Iran itself chose to close. This is not the language of a country that is winning. This is the language of a regime watching its foundations crack in real time. To understand how Iran got here, you have to understand what the American naval blockade has actually done to the country. Since April 13th, roughly 2 weeks ago, the United States has maintained a blockade line at the edge of the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. Ships can load up at Iranian ports. They can cross the Strait of Hormuz. But the moment they try to move into open international waters and reach their customers, the U.S. Navy is waiting. Iranian tankers are being stopped, turned around, and, in some cases, seized entirely. The result is visible from space. Satellite imagery now shows Iranian waters and the Gulf of Oman filling up with stranded tankers. White dots clustered in the water, ships loaded with oil that cannot go anywhere, just floating, waiting, going nowhere. For Iran, this is not just a military inconvenience. This is an economic catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. Here is why the blockade hits Iran from two directions at once. Iran depends on exports to bring in revenue. Without exports, there's no money coming in. But Iran also depends heavily on imports, particularly food imports, to feed its population. With the blockade in place, neither direction works. Nothing is going out and nothing is coming in. The economy is being squeezed from both sides simultaneously, and Iranian officials are not hiding how scared they are. But what happened next changed everything about how the world understood what was really happening inside Iran. A leaked assessment from inside Iran's own security apparatus revealed that officials are now bracing for something they fear far more than American airstrikes. They are bracing for their own people. Iran's Supreme National Security Council held an emergency meeting to address what intelligence reports were describing as an almost inevitable resurgence of public protests. The kind of protests that, just a few months ago in January, nearly toppled the regime entirely. Security agencies presented their findings. The conclusion was stark. The protests are not a question of whether, they're only a question of when. The triggers are already in place: rising food prices, unemployment spreading through the private sector, the near total destruction of Iran's petrochemical and steel industries, and an internet blackout that has now lasted more than 60 days, leaving 90 million Iranians completely cut off from the outside world and, just as critically, from each other. Think about that number for a moment. 90 million people. More than 60 consecutive days. 9% of the country's internet gone. The regime did not shut down the internet to fight the United States. The regime shut down the internet to fight its own citizens. Because what they fear most is not an American missile. What they fear most is a video going viral, showing people in one city rising up, which then inspires people in another city to rise up, which then spirals into something that no security force can contain. The regime came terrifyingly close to losing power in January, and they know it. That near-death experience is exactly what is driving every decision they are making right now, including the flight to Moscow. Because the foreign minister did not go to Russia to discuss diplomacy in any conventional sense. He went because Iran is running out of time and running out of options. And Russia is the only major power that has been willing to stay in the same corner. But here is where things take a serious turn. Russia has not been able to deliver. When Vladimir Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine, Iran was one of his most important partners. Tehran provided Russia with Shahed drones, ballistic missiles, and even sent Iranian engineers into Russian territory to help build drone manufacturing facilities inside Russia itself. Iran gave generously when Russia needed it most. Now, Iran is in its own crisis. And what has Russia given back? Satellite intelligence, mostly. Russian satellites have been observed passing over American military bases in the region, and in the hours and days that follow, Iran has been able to conduct more precise strikes, using those coordinates to guide drone attacks that have done real damage. Russia helped. But it helped from a distance, carefully and always with one eye on its own war in Ukraine. Putin is stretched. Russia cannot afford to open a second front of real commitment in the Middle East. And Iran knows this, which is why the foreign minister's trip to St. Petersburg had an undercurrent of frustration beneath all the diplomatic language. The meeting lasted 2 hours behind closed doors. What was actually said may never be fully known, but one detail from the public statements after the meeting caught the attention of every analyst watching. Putin said, these were his words directed at the Iranian delegation. Convey to the Supreme Leader my appreciation for his message and best wishes for his good health. A message, not a call, not a video conversation, a written message. And suddenly, the question that has been circulating in intelligence circles for weeks became impossible to ignore. Is Iran's new Supreme Leader actually alive? This is not a fringe theory. This is a question being asked directly by the United States Secretary of State. Marco Rubio, in his first interview since the ceasefire began, said clearly that while the U.S. has indications the Supreme Leader is alive, they do not have evidence confirming his actual condition. He does not know if the man has the clerical credentials to hold the position. He does not know if he is actually making decisions or if someone else is making decisions on his behalf. For 45 years, the Supreme Leader was the central nervous system of the Islamic Republic. Every major decision, every military escalation, every negotiating position ultimately traced back to that office. And now, at the exact moment when Iran needs clear, unified, credible leadership more than at any point in its history, there is a genuine question mark over whether that leadership actually exists. An IRGC event in a major Iranian city recently displayed a mural honoring those killed in the war. On it was the image of the new Supreme Leader. Why would the Revolutionary Guard put up that image at an official event if there was genuine certainty about his status? Was it a show of confidence, or was it something closer to a performance? An attempt to project stability for a public that cannot access the internet and cannot independently verify anything? Nobody outside the innermost circle of the regime knows the answer, and that uncertainty is itself one of the most destabilizing forces in this entire crisis. Secretary Rubio laid it out plainly. Iran is deeply fractured internally right now, he said. And that fracture is more pronounced than at any point he can remember. There is a divide between those in the regime who understand they have to run an actual country and an actual economy, and those who are purely driven by ideology and theology, for whom no compromise is acceptable under any circumstances. The IRGC falls heavily into that second category. And the IRGC is not just a military force, it is a shadow government with its own economic interests, its own intelligence network, and its own vision for what Iran must never give up. And what the IRGC will never accept is any deal that touches Iran's nuclear program. This is the wall that every negotiation has crashed into. Iran sent a proposal to the United States suggesting the Strait of Hormuz could be reopened in exchange for lifting the naval blockade, with nuclear discussions to follow later. Rubio's response was clear: the nuclear question is not an afterthought. It is the entire reason this war started. There will be no deal that gives Iran economic relief, while the nuclear question gets deferred to some hypothetical future conversation. And so Iran is stuck. The economy is collapsing under the weight of the blockade. The oil storage that the country has been sitting on is running out. According to research from a major global data firm, Iran may have somewhere between 12 and 22 days of usable oil storage remaining before the pressure becomes truly unbearable. And not a single tanker has been confirmed to have successfully evaded the blockade since it began. 22 days? Maybe less. The foreign minister came back from Moscow without a breakthrough. The latest peace proposal was rejected. A revised plan is apparently being drafted, but the communications between Iran's negotiating team in the field and the actual decision makers back in Tehran are being described by sources close to the talks as difficult and slow. Difficult and slow. In a crisis measured in days, not months. That is a chilling description. Rubio put it in terms that were almost clinical in their precision. Iran right now, he said, has half the missiles it started with, none of the manufacturing facilities it used to have, and no navy to speak of. All of the problems that existed inside Iran before this war started, the economic instability, the popular resentment, the rotting infrastructure, are still there. Only now they are worse. Much worse. And yet, even in this condition, the regime cannot bring itself to make the one concession that would end this. Because, for the hardliners, the nuclear program is not a bargaining chip. It is the entire insurance policy of the regime's survival. Give that up, they believe, and you become Libya. And they watched what happened to Libya. This is the trap the Islamic Republic has built for itself. The thing that is supposed to guarantee the regime's survival is the very thing preventing it from surviving this moment. Meanwhile, the Iranian public is sitting in the dark. Literally. No internet, no information. Prices rising on the things they can still find, jobs disappearing in sectors that ran online, and intelligence officials inside the regime privately admitting that when the protests come, and they believe they will come, there will be nothing left to stop them. The regime sacrificed its economy to survive. It shut down its own people's connection to the world to survive. It watched its foreign minister fly to a struggling Russia to beg without begging, to ask for help without admitting it needs help. And through all of it, a question hangs over Tehran that no official will answer directly. The man who is supposed to be leading the Islamic Republic through all of this has not appeared in public, has not spoken on camera, has not been confirmed alive by any source that the rest of the world can independently verify. Putin sent his well wishes for the supreme leader's good health through a messenger. You do not send well wishes for someone's health when their health is not in question. The Islamic Republic of Iran has survived wars, revolutions, sanctions, assassinations, and 45 years of declared enemies. It has outlasted predictions of its collapse more times than anyone can count. It has always found a way to endure. But this time is different. This time, the blockade is economic strangulation. The leadership is fractured or possibly headless. The public is angrier and more desperate than it has ever been. And the one external partner Iran could count on is a man fighting his own survival in the fields of Ukraine. The next few days will determine more about the future of the Middle East than the last decade combined. A revised Iranian proposal is coming. The ceasefire clock is ticking, the oil storage is draining, the protests are being described as inevitable. And somewhere in Tehran, in a room no camera has been allowed to enter, someone is making decisions for a government that cannot afford another wrong one. The world is watching. And the window is closing faster than anyone is willing to say out loud.